How do you define economic development? If I ask that question to 10 people, I will get 10 different answers, even in a room full of economic developers. To those of us in the profession, we can likely agree on one thing. Economic development touches the lives of everyone, everywhere. To better understand it, let's begin with the back of a $1 bill. The all-seeing eye floats above a pyramid. Look closer. The pyramid is unfinished. It signifies that the new nation was and is continuously growing and far from finished. For the first 100 years, growth and development occurred at breakneck speed. Much of the innovation took place in the Northeast. It was ground zero for building the American free enterprise system. In fact, by 1860, manufacturing output in upstate New York was 3 times the total of all southern states combined. The manufacturing movement of goods became more efficient at the turn of the century. Cities flourished. With the introduction of long-distance telephone, executives could work in city centers and communicate and manage multiple production facilities and retail outlets to meet market demand. The landscape changed forever after World War II. The disrupting factor was the interstate highway system in the 1950s. With it, industries relocated to areas with cheaper land and labor. The Rust Belt lost jobs to the Sun Belt. Industrial development morphed into economic development as states crafted financial incentives to attract new industry, and the federal government helped develop poor rural areas and got involved with urban renewal. The internet dramatically leveled the playing field for many communities and changed the very nature of work, affecting corporate real estate needs with open and shared spaces, having flexible, shorter-term leases. The responsibilities and interests of economic developers expanded as well to meet more pressing business needs, such as helping find talent, addressing regulatory hurdles, accelerating innovation, and competing in world markets. Changes during the past decade have radically altered the profession. However, most economic development boards, councils, commissions, and elected officials still judge economic development on traditional measures, such as how many deals were done and how many new businesses and jobs were brought to the community. Obviously, that's very important. But at best, they are only seeing a fraction of what today's economic development is all about. Your economic developer must live in two worlds that exist side by side, the traditional one and a newer one that is much more integrated, which I call the integral model. This chart lays out what I see as the traditional alongside the integral approach. Keep in mind that no two communities are alike. And with this chart that I'm about to show you, it's not an either-or proposition. Economic development groups need to deliver on elements of both sides of the chart if their community is to prosper. Now, the traditional focus assumes that government has a role to play in balancing the playing field with more competitive areas and must provide incentives to compete. The integral model comes at it from the investor's perspective. The challenges are how to reduce business costs, sustain growth, and improve productivity. The traditional approach sees the economic developer as an individual contributor, respected for their abilities to speak the language of finance and real estate. The business world expects economic developers to remove hurdles to economic growth and to be more thoughtful in providing value-added business expertise. These are vastly different skill sets than what was required in the past. Your economic developer now finds herself in the center of all the action with public and private officials to influence positive community-based changes. Traditional economic development for public officials is all about legacy. The silver bullet comes in many varieties, from building new stadiums to wagering everything for the next mega project that will solve all problems and maybe even guarantee somebody re-election. Economic development today requires focus on the less sexy work of nurturing ecosystems, becoming less reliant on dominant industry clusters, anticipating disaster, building in resiliency, and knowing how to mitigate weaknesses that stymie regional and global competition. One organization or person cannot do it all. It's too complex, and a municipality only has so much that they can do. Getting anything done requires collaborating with multiple organizations. In larger communities, several groups take on different roles, but someone still has to orchestrate it all, and that's your economic developer. Smaller communities are more challenged, and the task for them is to prioritize actions. It all begs the question, what are we trying to achieve? The answer is economic prosperity. If you happen to be an economic developer in parts of Texas or the Silicon Valley, your job is managing growth. But if you are working in areas that have seen better days or in most rural areas, your efforts are going to focus on improving conditions for development and growth to occur. No matter which community you live in, there needs to be a solid foundation on which to build. Because without this, all other efforts are for naught, as they will crumble with time. One of my most difficult jobs was as New York State Commissioner of Economic Development and co-chair of Empire State Development in the months leading up to and into the Great Recession. My primary charge was to help revitalize areas outside of metropolitan New York City that were economically depressed after decades of neglect. I began by focusing on root causes and laid out 6 fundamentals for achieving economic prosperity. I called these the 6 I's. The 6 I's form the basis for regional blueprints. 1 year later, they helped catapult New York into the top position in North America for deals announced. In brief, my 6 fundamentals for economic prosperity are infrastructure: roads, bridges, water, sewer, telecommunications, broadband, airports, rail, ports, shovel-ready sites, and more. Innovation: this includes research and development, its commercialization, both in the private and the public sectors. Intellectual capital: from early childhood education through post-secondary and lifelong learning, it is workforce development. International, foreign direct investment, export of goods, opening up of new markets. Intrigue: every community has points of interest that draw us in. These are the places where we live and we want others to visit. And it's the reason why placemaking is so important these days, because the more we improve our local communities, it helps us then to be able to attract talent and improves the quality of life. Investment: the prevalence of capital to grow business, be it debt financing, seed or venture capital, and public financing. Michael Bloomberg was mayor of New York City when I outlined the 6 I's. In an economic development speech, he agreed with them. He said he'd add a 7th: intelligent government. Well, we all know that if government has it together, that is, if they support business, it can really make a difference. But if they don't, it's going to be next to impossible to achieve economic prosperity. Perhaps intelligent government is like mortar. It keeps the foundation from falling apart. The more government supports business, the better the odds are of attaining economic prosperity. Today's economic developers need to have highly refined skills, working with people from all walks of life, be able to build networks and manage organizations that adapt readily to changes. An economic developer's future is tied not only to the number of jobs created, but the stability of those jobs and diversification of the local tax base. They need to have strategies for making sure progress is being made on all fronts. The world of business and the business of economic development are ever evolving. Change is constant. Understanding it and staying on top of it is essential for success. So to define economic development, we need to acknowledge that it is first and foremost a process, that it is about restructuring and better positioning communities to compete. The most effective way to do it is to focus on business needs, to understand and support, as best we can, the investor's perspective. We do this to create jobs and generate new income that supports the local economy. We do it to produce greater economic prosperity and an improved quality of life in our communities.